Welcome to the Media Cat Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pigger, editor at the magazine. And for today's pod, I have two lovely people with me. I've got Sinead, Lambe, and Helena French of Imagen Insights. Helena's a client success exec there, and Sinead is Associate Director of Communications. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
How's it going? How are you both today?
I'll kick off. I'm really well, thank you. I'm enjoying the fact that it's slightly more sunshiny outside. It just makes such a difference. I feel like spring is almost around the corner.
Yeah, the clock's change probably helped.
Yeah, definitely.
I've had a chat with your colleagues before. I did a pod with Jay Richards once. We'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. I like to tie everything together. And this one, we're going to chat about our sort of our March theme at the magazine. I know we're at the end of March now, but we have a theme of kill your idols. But I'll also touch on the April theme near the end, which is the age of discontent. But I'll explain what they're all about. But first off, for those that either haven't listened to the J podcast I did or don't know what you guys do, I was wondering if you could both sort of explain your roles and kind of, a brief recap of what Imagen do.
Absolutely, I can kick off. So at Imagen Insights, we are a Gen Z market research platform. So we specialise in insights from young people for brands and organisations. We have over 30,000 young people in 111 countries around the world globally who all get paid to give their feedback and insights to our clients. And they can range from the likes of Unilever, the NFL, PepsiCo, to some of the smaller organisations. So we have a charity client called Shelter in the UK. And essentially, we can help with any marketing struggles that clients may be having. So anything around targeting Gen Z or around wanting to engage with Gen Z, then we are your people to get those insights from the young people. And I lead on the communications for us. So anything comms and marketing wise, that falls under my remit.
Sounds good. Hello.
So my role is client facing. So it will be working with the clients, understanding their pain points, understanding what they want to know from Gen Z, and helping them along that process in terms of creating briefs and then kind of setting up those briefs. And then I'm kind of part of the team that then delivers the insights back to them. So we get the fun task of kind of delving into what our community is saying, pulling out the key bits, and then working with the clients to kind of make sure that they understand what Gen Z would love to see from them. So yeah, that's my role.
Sounds good. So to get into our discussion around idols, I guess for the magazine we have a little bit of description there where we say, and this isn't our definition, but the sort of dictionary definition of idols being objects of extreme devotion. And the reason we decided to do that theme originally was saying, can idols ever be a good thing? We were originally talking about how Musk lost a record into the Guinness record books for losing a single amount of wealth for a person in a year. I think it was something like 182 billion or something crazy. But yeah, it was, and obviously lots of people idolize Musk, lots of people don't. Can idols ever be a good thing, and do they change as you get older, etc.? The sort of nature of them. So I just wanted to start really. Have either you two had any idols in your life? I don't know, when you're younger, now, like anything? Who wants to kick off with that?
I'm happy to. So I think I was thinking about this prior to our conversation, and what I've noticed for me is the switch in what I almost view an idol as. So I think when I was younger, growing up, idols, or maybe not so much idols, because I feel like I've never quite put anyone on a pedestal quite that high, but people that I would aspire to or look up to maybe were ones where I would aspire to have their lifestyle or to do something that they were doing. So when I was younger, I was very much into sport and I had my favourite football team and I'd look up to my favourite players. But I think now less so for what they're doing in maybe their professional life, but more so if their value sets align with mine. And I think that's where I've seen the switch as I've got older. So I've gone from idolising those that I would aspire to be like in terms of maybe their lifestyle or their money or their stance, but moved a shift towards, do their values align with mine, or what they're doing outside of the day-to-day? Is that something that I could get on board with? So I've almost gone from appreciating maybe my favourite football player to like really appreciating Gareth Southgate and the way he manages the England team and the way he has them conduct themselves. So I think for me, it's been that switch in like what I view as an idol or what kind of person I would look up to.
It almost sounds like a, well, not quite the hierarchy of needs type stuff, but, you know, where you sort of, perhaps your idols are more basic when you're younger. And then as you get older, you start to actually form opinions about the world and things that you want to value. Helena, how about you?
Well, I was having to think about this actually. And I think for me, I was kind of the generation that I idolized the first kind of YouTubers. So now we've got influencers. Influencers are a proper, common thing. But I think when I was 12, 13, 14, it was when the Isabellas and the Tanya Burrs first came on the scene. And we were all, I remember me and all of my friends absolutely idolized them. And it was the first time we'd seen people that weren't celebrities, but they were people that everyone knew and were looking up to. And we completely idolized all of them. And I think that's really interesting because now, I guess, Gen Z in general, probably are looking to influencers and it's kind of an accepted thing, but at the time it was something that was so new. And I think now if I look at who they are and what they represent, and they have evolved, I wouldn't say that I idolize them in the same way as what I did when I was 12, 13, but it's interesting that they have also, I guess, grown and changed their content and kind of changed what they're delivering on their social platforms because their audience has also grown up with them. So, you know, they're having babies now, they're doing all these different things. And I think lots of people have kind of followed their journey.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of one. I don't know if you can remember back 12, 13 age, but sort of, can you recall why you idolized them? Like what were they doing that was different, do you feel, like to, I don't know, traditional on the TV celebrities or whoever else you want to idolize, musicians or whatever?
I think it was that relatability, and I think that's something that has continued to stick with the idea of the influencer. So it was the first time that you were seeing normal people, or what we perceive to be completely normal people, getting in front of a camera and showing parts of their lives. And that at the time was something really new, and I think that was why they ended up being these big idols, and because there was a personal relationship there. So there was I guess we were able to kind of see ourselves in them, and they were us a few years down the line, or, you know, they were going and doing Primark calls. I remember that was something that was really, really big, was Primark calls, going into Primark, coming back and showing what they'd got. And that is something that we hadn't really seen before. And we talk about when we do our briefs with Gen Z now, they still say the same thing. And people are still talking about this idea of personal connection and relatability and authenticity.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so my next question was really around one of the reasons we created the theme was kind of a bit of a cautionary tale, as mentioned Musk already. But do you think that idols have a place in today's world? You know, can they be a good thing? I mean, you also mentioned the authenticity, but every idol that or many idols that people idolize fall from grace. They're flawed, and suddenly everyone's like, oh man, you know, not that one as well, they've done something bad. Or I don't know. I mean, I suppose the question here is, you know, do idols have a place in today's world, even if they are flawed and mess up and do bad things? Where do you guys stand on that?
I guess from my point of view on this one, and it's something that we've actually spoken about quite at length with our community, is around this whole air of cancel culture and whether that is such a thing or whether it's been a bit of a media hype, to be honest. And I think the difference between a cancel culture where Gen Z will, or young people will say, I'm absolutely not following that person anymore, or I'm not going to engage with their content. I think it's more about holding people to account. So if a influencer or a person of note, a public figure or a celebrity says something, young people are going to the depths of Google to find out if they've said that before and whether that aligns with the values of what they had previously. And I think for me, the difference I'm seeing around whether idols can have a place in society and whether they can have this fall from grace is just that they can rise really quickly. And we all know that. You get people that crop out of nowhere and suddenly have a huge social presence. If they find their niche, especially with things like TikTok, which have just like risen like the very obscure talents and things like that. But you can fall very quickly too. And I think that's something just to be aware of. And I'm thinking in terms of idols having a positive and a negative impact, if you look at the types of celebrities that are coming out with these crazy dietary trends and things like that, that can be quite dangerous, toxic culture for young people. And I think it's all about almost taking it with a pinch of salt, because as a Joe Blogs, as a human being, as a day-to-day person, you probably don't have the time, the budget, or the capacity to do these things that these celebrities are doing when it's like crazy trends and things. And I think that's where there's a danger, where if we idolize people too much from a young age, we can fall into sort of tricky territory in terms of trying to copy their lifestyles, which aren't always potentially the best for us.
Yeah. I was thinking sort of, obviously you guys are, talking to Gen Z all the time about all sorts of things, but how much do you sort of get into them about idols? And I don't want to say necessarily that idol equals influencer. There's probably a relationship there or some sort of correlation, but there are probably lots of other types of idols. I wondered, what sort of conversations do you tend to have with Gen Z about people they idolize?
I think it's a real mix, and I think there is a focus from Gen Z about making a difference and making the world a better place. We often talk to our community about that, and the fact that actually they are looking for people, as much as they're looking for, to influencers, they're also looking towards people who are making a difference and are engaging in real social issues. And often the influencers or celebrities that people are highlighting are people that they feel like are going beyond kind of, that it could be going beyond their industry. So it could be athletes that are not only changing the game in terms of how amazing they are as an athlete, but actually what are they doing on and off the pitch or on and off the track. So like Marcus Rashford, for example, he's often spoken about as someone that is idolized for going above and beyond and actually looking outwardly. And I think that Gen Z do have this concern and concern and interest in the wider world. And actually, I think they get a bad rep sometimes. Gen Z does get a bad rep for kind of being like, sometimes could be really surface level, and but actually I'm a Gen Z, care about the bigger social issues.
I mean, I suppose kind of carrying on from that, do you think that they have more of a two-way relationship with idols than perhaps past generations did? I guess the nature of social media and the not just social platforms, but other ways that they can kind of connect with them through, I guess, different tech and maybe events and stuff. Do you feel that there's a much closer relationship maybe than in the past?
I think so. And I think that people are probably still put on a pedestal in the same way, but I think we feel that we know them more, whether that's true or not, because obviously you can project any sort of image online. We all know that. So actually how authentic and how meaningful our connections are with idols and with influencers and celebrities is up for debate. But I definitely think there is a sense of feeling like an influencer, feeling like an idol, feeling like a celebrity, which I guess also comes with this idea of cancel culture, because we feel we have a right potentially to know certain things or a right to say certain things because we have that direct access to them, whereas in the past celebrities were these people, these idols were these people that were kind of unreachable and untouchable. So yeah, I definitely would say that it's a more personal connection.
I guess that touching on that point of knowing, I just wondered, because like, is it really a case of knowing them? Because I mean, in my mind, like even like if somebody's being authentic on social, I always feel that they're still putting on a face. It's still a performance. It's still scripted. And I just kind of wondered to what degree, I don't know, Gen Z know that, or do they genuinely feel more like, oh yeah, I definitely know these people, or do they think, okay, I understand that they're being a certain way or whatever, but I kind of like whatever it is that they're projecting, this sort of character, if you like. Or can they see through that? I don't know. Like, just me thinking off the top of my head, really.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, there is a move towards a more transparent type of idol and influencer and celebrity. I'm seeing lots of our young people talking about people they resonate with because whether they are appearing more real or whether they are more real on social, I guess that's the debate to be had. But I think there's definitely a move to not just necessarily showing all the good parts of life and what's going on, but also showing the bad parts. the trickier or more troubling times that we have. And I think influencers or celebrities that are doing that quite well, I guess you could look at Dr. Alex, who's turned like quite a really traumatic situation he's had in his life, also risen to fame through Love Island, but has turned that into something really quite positive with the work he's doing around mental health. And I think that's what Gen Z are warming to. I think that's what's engaging them. I think it's that transparency piece, and they don't just want that from idols. They want it from brands. They want it from everyone around them. They want to know like what the real truth is, and they'll go quite lengths to get that. But I think for me, that's where I'm seeing the real difference in terms of, I've literally probably in the past 2 or so years noticed a bit of a shift, even with the influencers that I started following. They're posting, pictures of them on a tough day crying and things, and where that is still putting on a face to an extent because you're putting it out to your audience. But I think it's trying to move away from this glossy, perfect, filtered lifestyle and trying to show the realities of life a little more. And I guess you could say with that is where the de-influencing trend has come in. So something a bit more recently is idols and celebrities and influencers taking to their platforms to try and encourage people not to spend money on certain things, or to spend more wisely, or to talk about things in a different, or to question things a bit more. And actually, I think as a prediction, that's something I think we'll see the rise of over the next year or so.
Yeah, that sounds quite on the money. Actually, I think there's we've got one of the interviews on the magazine at the moment is about de-influencing. I've only sort of briefly skimmed it, to be honest. One of my colleagues put it up, but actually, I'll go back after this and have a proper read. But that is quite interesting. A sort of it's almost one of those things of saying don't do this rather than do this. It's a complete 180. I guess I know we touched on cancel culture a little bit, but I just wanted to just get into a tiny bit more. Just, do you feel that, I don't know, the sort of younger generations at the moment are more into kind of, I guess, tearing down idols if they fail? Gen Z perhaps laying out the standards, saying we want X, Y, and Z from you, and it's not a big ask, but if you don't give us X, Y, Z, then we're not going to look the other way or whatever. We are going to take you down, so to speak. I don't know.
I think from what I'm seeing is they have more access than anyone has ever had to anything, right? So they're digitally native. They've grown up with being able to question things, being able to do the research, being able to look behind the scenes. And they've grown up with this access to people that we've never really had before because of social media and things like that. So I think with cancel culture, it's an interesting one, because actually when we spoke to our community, I can't remember the exact stat, but it was up in the 70s, percentage-wise, said that actually they don't agree with cancel culture. Like, they don't agree with just cancelling out a brand or a person for like one error. But what they do believe in is pulling them up and having them, explain their actions, or like give the context around why something might have happened. And I think actually it's an interesting thing for brands and idols alike, because it's this like, should they be scared and should they be on the fence about saying certain things or running with a certain campaign for fear of being cancelled? But actually, to what extent will they be cancelled? I think there's probably ample examples of brands that have maybe not got things quite right, but when they've held their hands up and said, like, we did this, we got it slightly offbeat, like we kind of messed up a bit, that's almost received a lot better. And I think it's the same for idols and celebrities. I think when people have done something or said something a bit controversial, but then actually acknowledged it and almost come back with their like apology or whatever, I think Gen Z are much more susceptible to that, and they just want a bit of honesty, and that's what we're hearing from our community. They just want to understand fully the context about the world around them. And we actually did an event panel a couple of months ago, and one of the community members said that they will go through to like the 3rd page of Google to try and get their thought process on like a campaign or something, to make sure that they feel as informed as possible. And I think that's the access that they have that is different to like millennials. I remember when like I started like initially Googling things, and like I've never gone that in depth into things because I've never really felt I needed to. I've always taken things maybe at a surface level, but I think definitely the trend we're seeing with Generation Z is that they are willing to put the effort in to find out more about the background of something.
I remember reading a piece about this once. I think it might be up on the magazine, and it was to do with the nature of how you say sorry. Depending on the act or depending on the transgression that you made, it was kind of, if you said sorry, and say it was like a mild bad thing that you did, but you said sorry in a really terrible way, you would get taken down much harder than someone that perhaps did a worse thing, but they said sorry in a great way, which it's kind of interesting. I think people will, because people respond right to if you, like you say, if you're authentic and honest and you lay out the context, etc. You said, oh, we were trying to do this, but we got confused or messed up or whatever, and we went down the wrong path. Anyway, we're really sorry.
Yeah, and I think with that, it's like with brands, idols, celebrities, influencers, what steps are they then putting in place to make sure it won't happen again? And I think that's what Gen Z will hold you accountable for. Like, an apology is all well and good, but what are you doing to then like rectify it?
Well, it's kind of learning from your actions, right? Isn't it? It's sort of saying, okay, we messed up, but we learn from our actions. That's literally, it's kind of the building block of storytelling and movies, etc. It's like you watch it and you're like, oh, this character keeps messing up, but they don't learn anything. I think Homer did that in The Simpsons actually once, where they got to the end of the episode and Marge was like, oh, did you learn your lesson? And he's like, Marge, I didn't learn a thing. And that was because it's Homer and he's meant to be an idiot, but it was obviously done for comedic effect. But I know we haven't got too much time, so I just want to touch on a few things. I always say this and then try and cram in about 5 questions. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was wholesome idols. Obviously, lots of terrible idols, but I don't know if it's more of a millennial thing, and lots of like sort of figures from the 90s, etc., coming through that are kind of the antidote to all the terrible people we seem to be seeing in recent years. But particularly on things like TikTok, the sort of rise of the wholesome 90s person that's coming back, people like Brendan Fraser. And I wrote some questions for this podcast because we were going to do it a while ago, and then the Oscars happened, and now Brendan has an Oscar as well. But not just him. Other wholesome idol, Kike Kwon, got an Oscar as well, and he was perhaps the most wholesome Oscar winner in history, just bouncing around, so happy to be there and so excited. And I just wondered if that's the sort of counter to the doom and gloom in the world. Gen Z seeking out genuinely more wholesome people. Maybe if they didn't necessarily grow up with them. I mean, I'm older millennial, so all these 90s figures are kind of my era, but I just wondered what the sort of Gen Z take on it was.
I think it's wholesome people, but I would actually counteract that and say I think it's the wholesome content. It's you seeing them bouncing around when they get that. It's the older grandparents that are the TikTokers that are making, this gorgeous pieces of content where it's got comical value, but you're also like, oh, they could be my grandparents making that funny TikTok dance with their grandchild. And I think that's a move. Like, we want, gosh, it's been a real time the past few years across globally, of course, with things we won't mention because I think we've heard it to death. But I think for me, it's that move towards a bit more positivity. Like, we're searching and yearning and looking for things that are just a bit warmer. And I think Gen Z have been open about their struggles with sort of mental health and with the world as it has been. And I think they are looking for those little rays of sunshine that we find in positive content. I don't know if that's how you would feel about the conversations you have with the community as well, Helena.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, for example, I think TikTok blew up completely over lockdown. If you look at all the TikTokers that have now come through, they are all pretty much kind of, their content is comedy focused. And when we talk to our Gen Z audience and we ask them, who are their favourite influencers at the minute, who are their idols, a lot of them talk about people that produce uplifting and funny content. So I think there is a move and a kind of a need and a desire to see this light-hearted side of the internet, because, the internet has a lot of dark sides. The world has a lot of doom and gloom. And I think we can give the internet, we give social media a very bad rap sometimes, but actually it's kind of the antidote, and it's that light relief for a lot of people. I think millennials, Gen Z alike.
Yeah, I think for me at least, it was sort of the slight antidote to Twitter. Even before Musk took over, Twitter always seemed to be the place where it would just descend into arguments within like 2 seconds. Not entirely, like you can find your bubbles and communities there, but I think that the sort of subcultures on TikTok and generally how TikTok blew up, at least in my impression and people I talked to, is it did seem to be more to do with leaning into positivity and hope. And I guess, I don't know if that plays into things like hopecore and slow living and like, these kind of trends of like people wanting sort of simpler, happier things. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I stumbled maybe a year ago on this guy that does kind of thirst traps, but he's probably in his 60s maybe, and he makes like knits cardigans, and then like the music is kind of sexy, like he's going to do some sexy reveal, but he's just wearing a cardigan. We'll put a link in the show notes. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to put a link in the show notes anyway, because it's amazing. But in my mind, it's kind of subverting various trends and things that you might see on TikTok, and it's kind of done in a brilliant way for comedic effect. But it also kind of says, there's a place for you here as well. I did a podcast with people from TikTok a couple of years ago now, and they were talking about how it isn't necessarily, the age ranges on there are actually really varied, which again I think is quite a sort of positive thing. I don't want to like go on a downer for probably the last 1 or 2 minutes we got, but I did want to just mention our April theme of sort of the age of discontent, and I guess maybe it ties into this with sort of saying, whose job is it to make us happier? And I wondered, what sort of conversations do you guys get into with Gen Z when you talk about happiness in general?
I think there's an awareness that not only is kind of mental health and well-being your own personal responsibility, but that actually there's aspects of life, for example, the workplace, that in previous generations, potentially we've accepted things like burnout and things like that. Whereas actually now there's a kind of an expectation for the workplace, your employers, to prioritize that and to have things in place and to take your mental health and well-being seriously. So it's kind of this two-way kind of recognition that, yes, we have personal responsibility and you can't be, projecting your mental health or your issues on other people, but also, whereas previous generations may have just kind of maybe not had an awareness of the impacts that certain work conditions have or things like that now actually, there is kind of a collective effort to change that.
Yeah, I think maybe perhaps past generations they had an awareness, but there's also an element of like, this is just how it's done, and then as it kind of maybe moved into millennial, it feels a little bit like it was kind of like, oh, okay, that's sort of how it used to be done. Maybe we could do this in the future, or they might talk a big game, but then in practice, nothing really happened, or they would just do the opposite or whatever, But I do maybe feel like Gen Z are actually like, well, no, we're putting our foot down now. Like something actually does have to happen, or we're not going to work. We're going to walk out.
Absolutely. I think, yes, to your point, Mike, there's always been an awareness, but I think the change and the shift is in acceptance. I think it's more okay to talk about things in the workplace or outside the workplace and just in general, because the awareness has almost moved into acceptance. So people are more open about the things that they're going through for the better, I personally think. And actually, I think that's the shift we're seeing. Like we've always known that people burn out, that if you work too hard, but now it's a bit like, okay, what can we actually do about that? And I do think genuinely that's been driven by the slightly latter end of the millennials and Gen Z coming into the workplace and going, we've seen what you've done and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, so I think we touched on earlier about learning from your mistakes, right? If you're basically just Homer Simpson and you just learn nothing as you go through life, then what is the point? But yes, we got to wrap up. So I just wanted to ask you guys, what's have you got anything exciting ahead this year that you're looking forward to, either internally as a company or just stuff in the world that excites you? I know it's a bit of a random question.
No, it's always nice to look at things that you're excited about. I think as a company, we're in a really exciting place. We're working with a real diverse cross-section of clients now, which is really nice. So we're doing work in the charity space, but also with FMCG. So lots of exciting projects in the pipeline there. And then personally, I mentioned it already and it's a bit boring, but I'm just ready for summer. I'm excited to get outside, go to lots of music festivals and gigs and travel a bit now that we can, although flights are extortionately expensive at the moment. But just excited for the summer, really. What about you, Helena?
I guess with regards to Gen Z in general, I'm really excited to see, off the back of the conversation that we've had, to see where this kind of de-influencing trend goes, and the idea of the idol, and see what Gen Z do with that, and see whether actually idols become increasingly more positive. And we change the perception of that.
Sounds good. Yeah, very exciting stuff. I'm also excited for spring. I don't know about summer because summers are becoming slightly unbearable in London. Just it's impossible to breathe the air.
It's very true.
It's very, very hot. I don't know if that's ever going to change. Who knows? Anyway, I just really good conversation, and thank you both of you so much for coming on the Media Cat Magazine podcast.
Thank you for having us. It's been great.